Welcome to the Mediation, the New Possibilities Hour. It's June 23rd, 2020, and we are very happy to have our dear friend Esther Bleuel here as our special guest. Esther and I have been friends for many, many years. She was one of my predecessors as president of the Southern California Mediation Association. I served as a board member under her leadership, and I can tell you from personal experience, Esther is a great mentor and a great leader. Esther is also the author of Getting Unstuck, Experience the Joy of Finishing Strong. Esther's book tells her personal story in 12 chapters, each with an essential life lesson to encourage readers to discover their own story. The main message is, we do not have to be defined by our history. Esther also provides 44 skills to help readers change behaviors that don't work. Esther has served as an adjunct professor of negotiation and mediation at Pepperdine's Business and Law Schools for over 10 years. She was a corporate executive in the newspaper industry for more than 15 years. She founded her company, Tough Talk Coach, to provide coaching and training for resolving conflict with organizations. Esther's also a licensed psychotherapist with more than a quarter century of experience working with motivated couples, groups, and individuals. Esther's here today to talk to us about how to get through these tough times. So with that, my friend, take it away.
Good morning. This is pretty fun. And talking about one of my favorite subjects, hope. But we're going to start with fear and frustration and uncertainty because there's a bit of that going on. So in some ways, it seems like everything's changed. And everyone's experience of that change is different. Yet, we all share one thing in common, our humanity. So a question that I often ponder is, who are you when no one is looking? And that's an important question because wherever you go, there you are. So it's pretty important to know about that. So first, let's talk about the situation. Many things in the country are very different now, and it in some ways seems like it's all at once, causing us to feel overwhelmed, scared, angry, confused, maybe cynical, or even despairing. And fear stops us. So it's important to fortify ourselves against fear and get it behind us so that it can be a motivator and help us look forward to peace or hope, at least hope. So not only are we experiencing significant problems kind of all at the same time, pandemic and social upheaval, but we're also feeling a loss of trust in the foundation of a lot of our foundational institutions in society, like equal justice under the law, education, media, religion, government. So it's a bit chaotic at the moment. And whoever would have really in our lifetime imagined that the entire country, and in fact, almost the entire world, would be essentially shut down by a wildly contagious virus. Citizens isolated and physically distanced, and commerce virtually stopped. Now, then what happened was the horrific killing of a Black man by a Minnesota police officer. And that ignited a nationwide protest and riot season. And of course, we know the issue of racism has festered in America for decades. And this tragedy really sparked a renewed national alarm and conversation and debate, which we hope will be constructive. We'll have to see about that. The current escalating violence and really the wanton destruction of property and historical monuments and statues and increased crime, murder, and divisiveness really shocks the conscience and kind of tears at the social fabric of the whole country. So at this point, it's really critical that we stop and listen and think. We require resolve and goodwill and some perspective to address and resolve real entrenched problems, rather than focus on rhetoric, changing a law, some police training, some well-intentioned protest. We really need more than that now. So here's the thing. It's not possible to deal with anything overwhelming or out of control all at once. Bite-sized pieces are the key to unraveling any complicated situation. And our current challenges are no exception to that, to be sure. So let's just think about this for a minute. You may or may not know that human beings cannot stand to not know things. And our hardwiring actually compels us to make sense out of things. So in fact, when we don't understand something, think about yourself, we tend to make stuff up. And that assuming tends to exacerbate situations, to be sure. So by naming a feeling, a situation, a process, we can acknowledge it and understand it and deal with it, because naming shapes and defines and actually shows respect for something. Accurate naming then provides for a shared understanding. And this is important because you can't solve a generality. You can't solve a thing if you don't know what it is. So it's really, I'm going to say it again, necessary to slow things down so that we can think about one thing at a time. Because less done well is exponentially better than 3 or 11 or 52 things done haphazardly or incompletely. So think of multitasking, for example. Research is very clear on this and the inefficiency of this common practice, because focused attention is essential for achieving success and good results. So why am I talking about this now? Because in times of uncertainty and fear, our habits can steady us and ground us. And familiarity, you probably know, is comforting and calming, and it helps us feel somewhat secure, even though it's kind of perhaps negative, right? We see people doing things that don't work over and over and over, and even though they don't work, and part of that is because it's familiar. You know, you can get through it. It won't be fatal. So familiarity is, in normal times, may seem kind of boring, but in fact, it's one of the things that can really help. And when you think about disasters and big problems, doing normal things that are familiar is very. So when the world around us seems, and maybe is, pretty chaotic, we need to focus on what we can control. And all we can do is all we can do within our own sphere of influence. Like, I can't impact Washington, D.C., however, I can impact my own life. And ruminating and worrying about generalities and things that we can't control can take us down a proverbial rabbit hole in a really big hurry. So remember to name and deal with one thing at a time. And one of the things to do is really to determine how to move towards something better that's worth the effort, something that matters to you. And do that first for yourself and then for someone else. It's not selfish to do it for yourself first. You know, on the airplane, the instructions about, in an emergency, put your own mask on first, right? That's necessary, okay? So now I'm talking about attitude here, because the truth is that we actually can decide what to think. Now, we can't choose our feelings. They just happen fast. And we've all experienced getting triggered by some surprise stimulus. And so the essential skill is to slow down, giving our brains a moment to catch up and figure out what happened so that we can name the feeling and figure out what might be going on. So sometimes we know right away what it is, and sometimes we don't. The amygdala, which is that little part of the brain at the base of your spine, at the top of your spine, it's constantly assessing for threat. And when threat's perceived, we receive a warning. We might call that a trigger. So now what? We all know that what happens is not what matters so much. What really matters is how we handle it and what it means to us. Is it a challenge? Is it devastating? What does it mean to me? Might be different than what it means to you, right? Resilience helps us have hope and rise up from adversity. And it's absolutely possible, some people don't believe this, but it's really possible to decide to think and act in certain ways to navigate any kind of rough time. So acknowledge that suffering is a part of life and everybody has tragedy and sad stories, okay? We're all hardwired to notice threats, and as resilient people, we can decide what to think and where to focus our attention on things we can change and decide to accept the things that we can't change. This is important. When doubts threaten to overwhelm us, which certainly can happen, remember that we're also hardwired to survive. Thank goodness, right? And to recognize that whatever the permanent situation is not, sorry, whatever the current situation is, it's not permanent. So we can stop and ask, well, is what I'm doing harmful or helpful? So here's a little clue. If it's harmful, stop, okay? If you're doing something harmful, just knock it off, all right? So you could even decide to be kind to yourself. You know, just a thought, it works. So by asking yourselves these questions, we really can take some control, some self-control, at least about our decision-making process. So we all gain wisdom from having perspective and from learning from our experiences. And I have this idea that if you're going to suffer in life, don't suffer for nothing. At least learn something. That's a good thing. And then if you're going to make mistakes, at least make new ones, right? So each one of us needs something worthwhile to do, somebody to love and to be loved, something important to believe in, and some kind of life meaning or purpose to hope for. And so, as Jeff said, I wrote a book that I was inspired to write because of having hope and really wanting other people to know it's really possible to do these things, to decide what to think, to decide how to handle things. And you don't have to be defined by something bad that happens to you. You really can change, and it's not impossible at all. So thanks for listening, and thanks for being here early on a Tuesday morning. And if you'd like to comment or if you have questions, now would be a really good time to do that.
Okay, Esther, thank you. Thank you. Very optimistic and forward-looking and hopeful message. Thank you very much. We have a bunch of bright and articulate and curious people. Oh yes, let's make sure everybody gets to see the book.
This is the book. I really did write a book, and I really
Beautiful.
did write it to give people hope, and this is it.
Great, great. And Natalie, you posted in the chat section information about the book, including how to order your very own copy, right?
Yeah. Jeff, I got to tell you, it's one of the few books that I have read through cover to cover more than twice.
Wow.
It really is that good. So I do recommend it to family and friends. I will then, of course, obviously recommend it to everyone else. But it also encouraged the Will Work for Food program that we're all participating in. Because when I was watching the news and I saw all of the people lined up at food banks because of food insecurity, economic insecurity, all these kinds of things that are happening right now as we're recording this, what I initially wanted to do was just write a check and make it all better. I just wanted to make it better for people, but I couldn't do that because you can only do what you can do. So says my teacher, Esther, and the thing that I could do was reach out to my colleagues and help my colleagues who were probably experiencing some difficulties at this time, and encourage them to help their neighbors who were experiencing food insecurity at this particular time. And so one of the great lessons that I learned from Esther's book was that you can only do what you can do, and Will Work for Food is something that we can do. So there's your testimonial, Esther.
That's great. And this webinar, of course, is part of the Will Work for Food project. And we put on these webinars. We hope they provide value to people, valuable information to people. There's no charge for these webinars. We do hope that if people like what they see, they contribute to a food bank of their choice and help to solve the problem of food insecurity in our society.
Yeah.
That's true all around the world. So with that, why don't we open it up to questions? We have a crowd of about 12 people here today, which means I don't think we have to work too hard moderating the conversation, Natalie. I think we can start out simply by asking people if they wish to ask a question of Esther. Unmute yourself and please ask a question. And if nobody starts, I'll start, which is, Esther, if there's one practical thing that people can do to improve their lives, what would be one real practical brass tacks thing that you could teach us today? Number one on the hit list.
I think number one, excuse me, is to have a relationship with yourself that is self-respecting, based on values and principles, and is matched by congruent behavior. Because that's the reason for talking about what's familiar and what's normal and so forth. If you are not your best self, you don't have that self available to give and share. I believe we all have gifts and talents, and we have a responsibility to use them and share them, which is what Natalie just talked about. That's why we love Natalie, because she really embodies that principle of being a best self. And I really mean that question. Really pay attention. Who are you when no one is looking? Are you proud of yourself? Are you self-respecting? Do you do what you say? Do you keep your promises? All those kind of things. And then you can add hope and all those kinds of things to it. But it doesn't work over time if it's not authentic and real. Like anybody can pretend anything for a short amount of time, right? But it's like we've known each other a long time and we still hold one another in high regard because of that consistency. So I would say thank you for that question. I hadn't thought about that exactly, but I know that to be true.
And since every journey begins with a single step, what is the first step on that journey for somebody who really wants to improve in that regard?
I think a lot of times what happens is people don't feel well, right? They're not proud of themselves. And it may be, you may be anxious or mad or, something's going on. You're not at rest or at some sort of peace, and that can wake you up. And you might And then it's a thought, I don't want to keep doing this. And I think we've probably all had that experience where something's going on and then you get triggered or aware, or, something wakes you up and you go, wow, I'm 30 pounds overweight. Oh, I don't seem to have extra money in the bank account, whatever it is that gets your attention. And then you get ready to say, this doesn't work for me. I don't want this anymore. I want something better, which is why I said that. The idea of moving towards something better that's worth it. Not just any old thing, but something that matters to you. If you're not going to do your own life, whose life should who should I ask, right? If you don't know about you, who should I ask? Maybe I should ask Colleen or Michelle or James, who are you that you're proud of?
What's the distinction between a person being able to take some of these steps on their own and the time when a psychotherapist or a business coach or some other
a friend,
professional person is necessary? How do you draw that distinction?
Well, people are ready when they're ready, and not a moment sooner. And so there's a cliche that whenever a student is ready, a teacher will appear. Teachers are around all the time. Sometimes we don't pay any attention. It's like, I'm busy doing other stuff. And sometimes we're really, boy, I've just done this again. I'm really sick of this. There's always the book is very pragmatic about that, right? The whole book is, so can you relate to this? Can you relate to that? Have you ever thought about this? Well, if you're a person who's curious about yourself and life, generally you ask questions. Some people are pretty numb and, all of that kind of stuff. But I guess I'll say this. My belief is I can't make you be interested or curious or ready. But I never know, having been a teacher, I never know what somebody's going to hear, like this morning, right? Maybe somebody heard one thing. It's like, I'm going to think about that. Okay. But if nothing is offered, some people really have a deficit of, opportunities, or people don't tell them things. That's why I love groups so much, because you learn from all different kinds of people, but you can learn from life. But I think my goal always is to say, well, I don't know about you, but here's something that I know or I'm thinking about, or it might be helpful or whatever. And then just offer it. And then a person can either pick it up or not. And sometimes a person doesn't know they're ready. Lots of times we want to be, I think I should really be doing this or learning this, and then we don't take action. And that's how we know we're not ready. However, I'll say to people, it might be a good idea to consider writing a journal or, exercising or whatever. And the person in the room will say, I'm really going to do that. And a week later, it's like, so anyway, what was I going to, not ready. Okay, so who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Sometimes we think we should be ready. We think we should learn. We think we should do this or that, but should doesn't really do anything except make you feel bad. Right? It's the action that, either I started saving money, I started reading the book, or I didn't. That's how I know. That's it. It's easy peasy.
Fair enough. Let's have questions and comments from others. Please unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Charles, you're smiling.
Esther, I just want to say, I found that comment extremely interesting, that it's when you start taking the actions that you know that you're ready for something. Because that's a question that I've thought about over the years, about how do you force yourself to be ready to do something? And is that possible? And should you be approaching change in that way?
Thank you, Colleen. I love that question because one of the things I know is that if we start with the end in mind,
Mm-hmm.
then we get to think. So if we decide it's important to have friends and say, so why is it so, like Natalie said, it's really important to me to not lose content, right? That's Natalie. Some people, well, you know, if they call me, it's great. And if they don't, like that's, so to ask yourself, so, okay, a year from now, 6 months from now, what do I want to have happen? What do I want my life to look like, right? And then answer something. And you don't get to have 5 priorities. That's an oxymoron. I'm just saying. So, but decide and then say, okay, so why, so let's say you have 3 priorities, which will make me crazy. But then we say, well, why is number 1 so important? Well, why is the second one so important? Like, why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to you, Colleen? Might not matter to Michelle or Charles, but it matters to you. And so the idea is to create a life that's about you, that's meaningful, fulfilling, and joyful. So for me, that's an end, right? And then I get to think about what those things are and why they matter. So I think that's a way to think about it, Colleen. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for the question.
Welcome.
Others, please.
Hi, Janice.
Hi, I enjoyed your comments quite a bit. I wanted to ask about how do you get out of your own way? I'm an action girl. I do what I need to do, but when it comes to, and certainly in business, but when it comes to myself, I'm often finding it's the last priority. It will be, you know, the kids need this, the house needs that, my business needs this, the dogs need something. And then, oh yes, you know, I really could have used a shower. And you know, it's last. And it's not a complaint, it's more of a, you know, how do you get out of your own way? You're ready, but the space sometimes doesn't feel like it's there, or the time or the energy, or I don't know what, I'm not sure I'm articulating this very well, but
Oh, it's great. Thank you.
I
Thank
get the gist.
I do. So a couple of things. First of all, I would go back to what I said in the first place, your relationship with you. Like, are you your best friend? You hold yourself in high regard. You know what's important to you really, you know, like 4 or 5 things that are really important to you and why. And then what would my life or my day or my week look like if I actually didn't say yes when I really meant no? If I remembered that and or are different. So it's your needs, Janice, and mine. Not just mine, not just yours, but yours and mine. And it sounds like there's a lot of or. Well, it's, you know, it's really for Harry or Mary Beth or the kids or whatever, or me. Okay. And well, I'll get around to me, but it's not so much and, it sounds like, right? What she needs and what I need a shower, or I want a shower. Like, I want a nap, and you get to do that. So that's that. I would say that's where that starts. In the meantime, to slow down and ask that question. So anyway, Janice, I say to myself, is what I'm doing right now helpful or harmful? if it's harmful, stop. I hereby, as director of the universe on this call, give you permission to stop doing something that's not good for you. But anyway, so I will now tell you a personal moment. I wrote this book because I was stuck. I'd had a whole career in business, executive, managed, several hundred people and a lot of money. It's a big job, okay? Had 5 vice presidents, and I was good at conflict and negotiation and all that, okay? Conflict, especially customers, anyway. And so I transitioned and became a therapist and so forth. So because of that work and my own work as a therapist, I was okay. I was doing okay. However, I was completely conflict averse because my story in life was that I was expendable. Okay, I was not really wanted. And so I always thought if I do anything wrong, if I cause a problem, I know that I'm expendable and I'll be thrown away. So I was terrified of conflict because I always imagined either I'd get thrown away, it would escalate into a nightmare, and it would be bad, bad, bad. So I didn't do it. So I went to Pepperdine. That's where I met Jeff and that whole mediation community, met Natalie. I discovered in the dispute resolution master's program skills. Skills for how to deal with conflict, how to talk, how to listen, how to, navigate, how to do that, and what conflict is about. And guess what? It wasn't just all about me all the time. It's like all kinds of stuff I learned. And so what ended up happening, this is for real, is that as I learned those skills and used them in my practice with my clients in my own life, they worked. Really, it worked. And my clients would say, oh my God, I haven't talked to my sister in 13 years. And we just did what you said. And like many, many stories like that. And what happened was that I discovered that when I had an attitude of willingness to resolve stuff, and then had some skills for doing it, it worked. And so I had a confidence and a peace of knowing the possibility. Like, okay, this is going to be fine. And no matter what, I will handle myself in a way that I will not regret. I'm not going to be ashamed of how I behave anymore. So that's a long answer to the fact that it's possible to change. But you have to figure out what the problem is. And the best way to do that, I think, is slow down and say, is this working? What about it is working? Is this not working? What's going on? And then tell yourself the truth. But that kind of goes back to having a relationship with yourself, self-respect, and I'm important to me. Like, I'm not the most important person in the world. However, I'm important to me. And I'm gonna create a life that's about me, that's meaningful and fulfilling and joyful. And so maybe slow down. That might be the first thing I would say. Slow down and say, is what I'm doing helpful or not? And is it and instead of or? Those are the themes I especially hear. Does that answer? Thank you for the question.
Esther, can I expand on her question?
Please.
So I have a similar question in where putting myself first, I forget myself. I'll go through the to-do list and it's, as she said, the kids, the dogs, work, whatever. And I don't even realize till the end of the day that I haven't even put myself on the list. So I almost want to back up what your advice and go, how do you actually put yourself on the list to remember yourself, which sounds almost pathetic, but as a mother, self-employed, I realized later in the day that I hadn't even thought about myself. So it's a complete oversight. So how do you go back to step one by putting yourself on the list?
Thanks for that. I would say two things. First of all, start with the end in mind. Like, what do you want to have happen, in your life? But what do you want to have happen? Like, what would it look like if this were a good week? Like, what does it look like? What would it look like to live this week in my life where I was important, not giving myself up? Okay. And so, first of all, ask the question, and why is it so important? Why is it so important to be more important? Like, I don't know, my kids are happy, husband's happy, dog is happy, making money, whatever, it all seems fine. So maybe it's not that important. Like, so starting with the end in mind is a pretty big deal. And to really think about it and decide why is it so important for you and Janice to not give yourselves up all the time. That's an important question. Okay. The other thing, so I've said some things to Janice about that. Another thing to do, and one of the actions you can take, any of us can take, is to demonstrate to ourselves that we are important, is to keep a journal. Okay. And make a commitment to write, and this is from Julia Cameron a long time ago. She wrote a book about the artist's way, but one of her activities that I really learned from is to write 3 pages a day, that she calls them morning pages. Now, it's not about 3 pages. It's not about the journal. I've decided that I will pay attention to myself every day for as long as it takes to sit down and write about me and my life and what I think and feel and so forth for 3 pages. And so it's kind of a trick to get you to pay attention to yourself. But then you have to decide you're worth spending however long it takes to write 3 pages. And I can tell you, when I started doing this, oh boy, I was so rebellious. Why did I promise this? This is really stupid. I don't like this. This is really not. But I had made a commitment, so somehow I wasn't willing to abdicate that. And so I rebelled, for, I don't know, a week or two. This is really dumb. I don't like it. And finally I said, this is a little stupid. Why don't you just write something other than I don't like this? Anyway, but that is a way that you can do something concrete to tell yourself, to get your attention and say, okay, let's think about this. Is this helpful? Is what I'm doing helpful? Yes or no? Is what I'm doing harmful? Yes or no? So forth. So there are a few little questions that maybe can get you to pay attention, get any of us to pay attention to something. So thanks. You can tell I've done all this stuff. Like, oh yeah, I remember this one. Natalie knows it's all in the book. So anybody else? Thoughts, questions? This is really dumb. I'm sorry I signed up for this. I don't know.
Nobody's, no.
Oh, good.
I have another quick question if nobody else does.
Good.
So when you get to the part where you've, figure out what you want, you've executed, you've actually put yourself out there, you've sent emails or left messages or phone calls. I've done a little of that lately. The problem I'm finding is maintaining the motivation, because either you hear nothing, it's almost, you don't even hear rejection. It's just, especially submitting jobs or freelancing, it's dead air. Any tips on how to keep motivated?
Yeah. Indifference is the worst, right? At least if you're fighting somebody on the other side of the table. But if they don't even care, won't even bother to fight with you, that's pretty awful. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. And I guess I would say, well, I will say, you may want to consider investing your energy someplace where you get some reward and feedback, right? If you're, you've reached out or initiated things, 3 times or so, to someone or some situation. Now, job hunting is a different animal. But if we're talking about people, most people, I'm sorry to say, but it's true, most people do not live in a way that's present, committed, principled. Like most people don't. When I ask, I'll go sideways and say, when I ask people, so who are you when nobody's looking? It's like, what? Never occurs to a lot of people to really think about and decide who you want to be and why. Like, what matters to you? And so I have an exercise that I do with people about, your values. Like, what do you believe? If I learned this in school, where you ask somebody, well, think of one word when I ask you, what is a good person? What's the first word that comes to mind? Well, okay, so you may or may not be interested to know that then if I say, oh, honest, great. It's really important to be honest. And that's important because, well, I mean, everybody knows it's important to be honest. Well, we're not really getting anywhere because all you did was say the same thing over, right? And so really learning how and being committed to being discerning and thoughtful and really figure out what you mean is part of being mature and wise, right? Wisdom is when you have the perspective of like being up on a balcony or looking back at time and whatever. Things look different, right? This time, like even now we're in June. Well, things look different in June than they did in February in this country, and then different than March in this country. So perspective plus learning, not just experience, actually learning. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making is something happens that's not good, that's wrong, it's bad, it's a mess, whatever, and they just want to move on. Let's just move on. Put that behind us. Let's just move on. So it's a business deal, it's a relationship, it's a marriage, it's whatever it is. And it's like, well, then it's no surprise you make the same mistake again. You didn't do anything different. So most people don't want to look at, understand, take responsibility for your part in a wreck, right? It was just a wreck. It just happened to me. Well, maybe if the bridge fell on your head, maybe. But if you're in a dispute with somebody, it takes 2 people to be in a dispute. And so most people do not, cannot, won't, I don't know, look and learn. And so I meant what I said about don't suffer for nothing. Like if you have a divorce or a business thing or an illness or whatever, like look at it. Like, don't do this again. Like learn something. And so that's, you can make your life a lot better in a big hurry by learning from your experience. And of course, the bad experiences and the disasters are more powerful and more intense. So we can learn even more. However, most people want to move away from those as fast as possible. And then all you have is a wreck. And pretty soon your life fills up with all these wrecks. And, either nothing is learned, you can't let them go, or you keep doing the same thing over. So that's not helpful. That's one of those, this is unhelpful. Oh yes, I've done this before. I guess I'll keep doing it or not. So.
Esther, can I interrupt for just a second? One of the great things about the book that you've written is that each chapter has a kind of a workbook section. And so you can go through, and you don't have to go chapter 1 through chapter 12, but you can go through and find the chapter that sort of fits your moment, Michelle, and then you can work on that. Because in the book, Esther asks you questions, sort of questions that prompt a little self-reflection, and then she gives you points of possible activities, things that you might consider doing to change or alter or improve or in some way ameliorate your particular perspective or situation. And so inside the book, she doesn't just say, you know, this is something to think about, but there are also exercises for you to go through. And I highly recommend, you know, read the book and then go back and do the workbook session. And I put all of the information, Janice, in the chat. So if you scroll up, you'll find all of the links and everything. I have a question before Jeff starts playing me off with music. And it's about fear. And right now we've got the coronavirus, we're in self-isolation, or we're in lockdown, we've got protesters in the streets, we've got economic concerns, we've got food insecurity, we've all kinds of things that are creating fear for us. And one of the challenges that I face is that I don't want to be a stupid person. So I watch news and I watch various different channels to get the news. But then it creates fear, and I don't want to know what's happening because it makes me feel badly, but I need to know because I need to be a responsible human on the planet. And so what's your advice for helping us create some kind of balance so that we're not stupid, but we're not overwhelmed? How does that work?
Thank you for that. Interesting. I was asking myself that question last night, actually, because I was watching the news. And it's alarming. The news is alarming, and what's happening is. So a couple of things. All you can do is all you can do, right? Like you said, I can't feed everybody, and I can't make people stop tearing down statues and things, okay? So, you know, to pay attention and really understand what, if anything, can I do about this? You know, I can write letters, call people, or really because I can't control another person. So, you know, I'm clear about what I could do about people pulling down statues, let's say. Okay. And period. And what else? Feeding the homeless, whatever it is. And so one thing at a time, really to slow down and kind of give each thing its due, and then which things matter to me a lot and which things I can do something or not. I think the other thing is, and this is something I learned a long time ago, but you know, compartmentalizing can be problematic because we can just split ourselves off and just not deal with certain aspects of our life. So that's not what I'm talking about, and people do that a lot. Actually, Bill Clinton was sort of famous and known for compartment. Oh, I don't want to think about the, you know, women. We just don't think about that. We'll talk about this. And then, but then it didn't get talked about, didn't get dealt with, whatever. So I'm not talking about that. However, let's say it's riots in the streets, okay? So I'm educated, right? I've read things, I understand the situation, and that's not something I can do anything about. And it's heartbreaking, it's worrying, etc. And I'm really clear that I can't make people stop that. So I'm going to set that aside. And I kind of imagine, because I play games with myself, kind of imagine I'm going to put that one in a drawer. I know it's there. When I'm ready to look at it or deal with it or think about it or have an idea about it again, I can go get it. But I'm not going to carry it around my day here, because then you don't have a life, right? So you kind of need a way to clear the deck, so to speak, and know the difference between what you can change and what you can't. And then I feel strongly that I have a responsibility to do what I can do. Like I have to do, for me, I have to do what I can do. And then sometimes a little bit more. I'm not willing to just walk away from stuff that's important just because it's hard. But I think we have a responsibility to do what we can do and do it well. Like pay attention, do it, and then move on. So one of the things in the book is about how to let go of things, either that were something that was a wreck, and you've done all you can do about it, and it's maybe been a big problem or conflict or whatever. So there's a way to let go so that it is not emotionally hot. But what's going on now is hot all the time. But you can't live in that escalated place all the time, or you get nuts. And that's not helpful. That's not helpful. I think I'll stop that. So you can give yourself permission to take a break. You can decide to walk the dog, or, go have coffee with your friend or whatever, so that ability to do one thing at a time. Well, right now I'm taking a break and I'm going to sit down and read a book and pet my doggie. Okay, whatever. And I do the same thing with feeling sorry for myself. Like it's, oh no, like horrible. And I will say, so let's see, it's all going on 9 o'clock. So I might say to myself, oh, it's 10 minutes to 9. I'm going to feel sorry for myself until noon. Because it's really terrible. And then I'm going to go to the park with my dog. And that's so, compartmentalizing can be fun. But we need to be able to manage. You can't do, one thing at a time. That's, I think.
One thing I just wanted to mention in response to what you said, Esther, about how we want to just put, everything behind us and move on as quickly as possible. I feel like we're doing that as a nation, if not a world. It's like we just want to get back to, quote, normal, as though it exists somewhere out there, because it doesn't anymore. And I don't think it does. And I think that we have to learn from this, because just pretending it doesn't exist. I mean, I'm in San Diego, and I see a lot of people not wearing masks, not social distancing. And I think they just want to feel, quote, normal, like life is back to how it should be. And I kind of feel like we as a nation aren't learning right now from this. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But
no, you're right. And actually, one of the reasons why I started my business, Tough Talk Coach, is because pretty much relationships happen one conversation at a time. Okay. And all you can do is all you can do, and you can't change another person. And by the way, you don't have the right to do that, in my opinion. Okay. Like, I'm never going to be the boss of you. Okay. And nor should I. And so I can make a judgment about what behavior somebody's doing, if it's illegal or unkind or unfair, whatever. I can make a judgment about that behavior that would apply to anybody, like anybody doing this. That's a wrong thing to do. Okay, those are judgments. But to be judgmental and decide, you know what, really, Janice, obviously you're not a responsible person because you're not wearing a mask. And I think less of you because of it. Okay, so now I'm being judgmental, and it may be true that it's not a good idea, right, for people not to wear.
What I've done is, because I found myself doing what you just said, like basically going, wow, that's really irresponsible. And I started getting angry about it. And I thought, this is not right. This is affecting me now, and that's stupid. And so now what I do is like, I like to do the positive. So when someone is like hiking on a trail past me and they put their mask up because we're passing, I actually say, thank you for wearing your mask. I really appreciate that. Oh, you too. Welcome. You know, and there it's like a positive thing instead of a negative thing.
Yeah.
And
One interaction.
I slip back into, oh my gosh, that person's not doing the thing they're supposed to be doing. I have to go, stop it.
Well, and also when you're your best self, when I'm my best self, right? When each of us does that, we then model, right? And we learn. Most of communication is not words. And so we learn, like Jeff teaches me how to interact with him. Natalie teaches me how to interact with her, and so forth. Like we learn from that. And when you bring your best self, respectful, kind, fair, you know, all that stuff to the table, then the other person is dealing with, I'll just say, a competent, you know, adult. So yeah. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Esther. Can I say this? You know, being stuck sometimes is not just about us, but it's about relationships that we've outgrown, if I could put it that way, that people want us, they want to categorize us in a certain way. Oh, you're such and such because you were that way as a kid, or because you do this kind of work, you could never do that kind of work. To me, that's partly where the stuckness is being able to do the who are you when no one is working, and manifesting that even in those difficult relationships where people actually don't necessarily want you to change, because that will change their ability to have power over you, if I can put it that way. And you know, so I don't disagree with you that you should do what you can do to manage relationships appropriately, but sometimes the appropriate thing is to end the relationship.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, that is a huge issue for a lot of people. And one of the skills that I learned at Pepperdine is, first of all, the importance of speaking for yourself, not talking about other people. But you can say, I think it's important to say things out loud to people. Like if you're with a person, to say. So when something is going wrong, instead of just kind of, I want to get through this and there's no point, it'll be an argument, whatever, is to say, just stay in your own chair and say something true for you. Now, you don't have to say everything, but you can say stuff like, you know, Harry, it's kind of, this conversation's a little hard because it seems like you're really wanting me to be the way I was, or to do what I did or not do or whatever. And it sounds like that's uncomfortable for you. So you just observe, it's observing and commenting out loud.
Okay.
With something true. Doesn't have to be everything, but just, gee, that felt a little uncomfortable. Gosh, it seems like just not, well, obviously you never want, not the whole story, but it's more for you, it's more for the speaker than the other person, because you're affirming your right and your reality for yourself. And like you're offering it, and the person can either respect it and take it or not, and you have no control over that. So one of the things that's given me so much freedom is letting go of this idea that I can make anybody do things or that I can change anybody. It's like, that is a non-starter. Like, it does not work. So I don't expect it anymore. And so, but that's something that you can do when you're dealing with another person, is just observe and comment out loud little bit, something true. Don't, never lie. Like it, having dealt with a lot of paranoid people, lying to a paranoid person is a really bad idea. So to say something true for you, not for them, for you. But that's a hard one. And maybe you just start distancing yourself, or you don't initiate anymore, or you just decide not to dance. And there are lots of diplomatic ways to say, thank you so much for offering, Harold. It's like, that's really not going to work for me now, but it was lovely of you to offer. Or you can be diplomatic and say no. Just don't say yes if you really mean no, because you'll pay for it, because you'll be resentful. That's very bad. Don't do that.
Well, that's great advice, Esther, as is all of the advice and commentary you've given us. Our time is at an end. We had a wonderful conversation here with Esther Bleuel. Esther, if you want to hold up the book again, Getting Unstuck, it's available online at all the major booksellers. We recommend it to everybody. Esther, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Full commentary today. Thank you so much to our participants for the wonderful questions, answers, and commentary. Final reminder, this is part of the Will Work for Food project. There's no charge for these great webinars. We do hope, however, that if you like what you see, you'll contribute to a food bank of your choice. Natalie, how much have we raised so far for food banks around the world?
Jeff, we have surpassed $29,000 in the last 6 weeks.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
So we're going to add to that today.
Congratulations and thanks to everybody who's online today. Let's break through that $30,000 barrier. It's wonderful. With that, our time is up. Esther, once again, thank you very much. Natalie, thank you for organizing the Will Work for Food project. Thanks to everybody for their participation in this great conversation today. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great day.
Thanks, Esther. That was fantastic, as always.
That was fun.
Thank you, Esther. I think people really got a lot out of that.
I hope so. And if you get comments and things, I'd love to hear them. We never know how we impact other people, so that's always learning.
Well, I can tell you right now, Jeff and I do these programs twice a week, sometimes once a week, but mostly twice a week. And that was one of the more engaged groups that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Great. It was fun. It's always so interesting to know what other people think. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, what questions they really have.
Yeah.
So, good. Natalie, you'll email, I guess you can turn off the recording.
I can, yeah.